right, back in the hot seat. So today I'm going to talk about the camera bodies that I use for both professional and personal work on a regular basis. They're old, they're discontinued, and they still work great. And they're Nikon DSLRs. So my name's Aaron Goodis. I'm a landscape, adventure, and fly fishing photographer based here in Vancouver, British Columbia. Today I thought I would talk about the three cameras that I use on a really regular basis for both professional and personal work. I've been using these Nikon DSLRs in some cases for well over 10 years. They're really old, they're very much discontinued, and they're very much still photography cameras. However, they all shoot video. These days I would say that the video quality and capabilities of these cameras is pretty outdated. So in this case, I'm just going to talk about the still photography capabilities and why I love these cameras and why I think that they would be a great purchase for anyone who's looking to upgrade to a DSLR type camera or looking to get a really solid workhorse camera really cheap. And that's exactly what these are. I mean, I've seen these cameras on all the sites like eBay, Craigslist, Marketplace for dirt cheap compared to what they were when they were new. But I still use them. I use them for both professional work and personal work, and I still think they're great options for anyone who is just on a budget or just looking to get something relatively inexpensive that is still very, very good quality. So yeah, I'm just going to talk about these cameras. I'm going to start with my D300S camera. So this is the camera that started my career in professional photography. I use it with all the lenses that I had talked about in a previous video. It's an F mount mount for your lenses, so there's all sorts of really good options for really high level lenses. This one is a 12 megapixel DX, which is a crop sensor, but very, very clean image quality. Not the greatest with high ISOs as you'd expect, but I've shot hundreds, if not thousands, of remarkable photos from this camera, and I've had many published photos from this camera as well. So this is a very, very good option for anyone who is trying to get in the game and keeping it really cheap, or they have a budget of only a couple $100. I have seen this Nikon DSLR, the D300S, for like a couple $100, even $150 on Marketplace in really good condition. It is not a great video camera. However, it is the first DSLR that had video capabilities that Nikon had made. It's actually not too bad, and I think that might not be entirely correct. I think the D90 might have been, but this one was definitely not bad, and I did shoot some videos, but there was really no manual overrides for video, so the video was not the greatest. There was some little tricks, but was not awesome. But when it comes to still photography, even though it's only 12 megapixels, it's just an absolute tank of a camera. The long exposure capabilities are incredible, and I think that's because of the low megapixel count. But I've shot like 10-minute exposures on this camera with no need to use noise reduction settings built into the camera. They were just clean right out of the camera. Just a really good camera. So I use these cameras in RAW modes. I never shoot JPEGs, always RAW, and I typically always use manual or aperture priority, and I set my ISO, and I try to keep the ISO pretty low. So in this case, the 200 to 300, 400 are pretty good. It maxes out about 800 ISO. Anything over that, you're gonna probably have a pretty noisy image. But other than that, it's a really good camera. And this particular camera was released in August of 2009. And I think I've had this camera for probably 12, 13 years now. So just a really, really good camera, and it's one of the ones that launched my career. So this was an awesome, awesome buy if you want to buy a cheap, super durable, very robust, weather resistant DSLR. So great option. Okay, second camera I'm going to talk about is the Nikon D800. When I bought this camera, I was like, I hit the jackpot. This is like an incredible camera. I've had this camera for about 10 years now, and it was introduced in February of 2012. Just an absolute tank of a camera, 36 megapixel full frame, huge dynamic range. Just an absolutely beautiful, beautiful camera with incredible image quality. The downside to this camera is that it kind of taps out about 3200 ISO. So if it's not the greatest for, you know, very high ISO. But a lot of cameras at that time with the high megapixel count were not. And it's not the greatest with long exposures unless you are willing to use the long exposure noise reduction in camera. That doubles your exposure time. But as an example, if you shoot over 30 seconds, so potentially like a 1 minute, 2 minute, 3 minute exposure without the noise reduction, it's super, super noisy. But with the noise reduction setting turned on, which doubles your exposure time, so if it's a 2 minute exposure, now it's 4 minutes total, it cleans the file in camera so well that there's no noise at all and becomes an absolutely incredible long exposure photograph. Super, super good, super durable, just built like a tank. This is the Nikon D800. And honestly, you can find this camera at about $1,000 in almost new condition, but a little bit used, about, you know, $600 to $800. And I think at this point, that is an absolutely steal of a buy for a full frame camera of this capability. Absolutely beautiful camera. And I have been using this camera for a very long time, and I still use it to this day. That's the Nikon D800. Lastly is the Nikon D750. So this camera came out in 2014, and I've been using this camera for about 7 years now. This one is also a full frame sensor, FX format for those Nikon users, and it's 24 megapixels. A little bit smaller than the D800 and a little bit lighter, but also just as durable, very much built like a tank. It's all like weather sealed, like all these Nikon cameras are. And what the beauty is of this camera is the high ISO is really, really good. So it was one of the best cameras at the time, at its release date, to have these like beautiful high ISO settings where you could potentially shoot at like 8000 ISO without much problem. So for those who are shooting stars, Milky Way, any night photography, and they needed the really high ISO, this camera was designed for you. It's an absolutely beautiful camera, light in hand, grip is perfect, just a super nice camera, and the image quality is really, really good. I will say with all of these cameras, I shoot them in RAW all the time and process them in Lightroom and Photoshop. And I shoot in manual modes or aperture priority modes. And I don't really do much else. I adjust the ISO as I need them. So I definitely use these cameras typically in like a manual type setting. And yeah, they're just really, really good. I do find that all of these cameras, the raw files are so easy to edit. They work with old computers really well. So if you're using like older computers with older programs with like Lightroom and Photoshop, these raw files work great with that, whereas some of the newer cameras, the files are just so big, they just are not compatible without having a newer computer. So that's a kind of a plus with having these older cameras, but just super, super good. Yeah, really, really nice cameras. Highly recommend them. And again, I think you can find some of these cameras on the used market for, pretty dirt cheap. So that's the Nikon D750. They're just super good. So I hope that you enjoy this video. And again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.